Get Pucked.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Matt and Vito here. No Dave today, unfortunately, but if you're watching on YouTube, you might see a new face. We'd like to welcome, first time on the show, new member of the podcast, Luca, longtime friend of ours, and big-time Habs fan. How you doing, man?
Not bad. How are you guys?
Always good.
Super nervous.
Canadiens, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. Don't
We're
worry.
just a simple little podcast.
All 30 people that listen to us. Don't worry about it. Cool, man. All right. Well, listen, very happy to have you. I'm sure that the people that do listen are going to be very interested in your insight on some of the questions we're going to talk about, some of the topics today. And I think on that note, we'll start with you, but let's get into it right now, right away. The Canadiens playing right out of the Four Nations were on fire. Last couple games, not so much. And at the time of recording today, most betting sites, if you will, Vegas, if you prefer, have the Canadiens in and around 49%. Some have them at 50, some like 45, but generally speaking in that ballpark to make the playoffs. Do you buy in on that? Are we saying that they're a 50-50? Do you think it should be a little bit more? Do you think that even 50% is lofty? What's your take on it? Start with you, Luca.
All right, yeah, for sure. Just throwing me to the wolves there. All right, cool.
Let's do it, baby. Get in there.
Look, to be honest, 50% seems pretty fair. We're like, whatever, like 1 or 2 points ahead of the Islanders, but they have a game in hand. We're in a good position to like move forward and like to actually make the playoffs, which is so new to me. Because like we haven't had this feeling, this like excitement in like what, 8 years, 9 years? Has it been that long? No. It's been 4 years, 2020.
Well, the count, yeah, if you count COVID and the cup run, yeah, that was big. But yeah, to have a team that was competing it's been a couple of years for sure.
Exactly. No, but 50% seems pretty fair, to be honest. Honestly, I mean, I'm a Habs fan, so I'm like, no, 100% we're going to make it. There's no way we're not going to make the playoffs. No, but like, yeah, 50 sounds pretty fair. I heard, I thought it was actually like 53.
I think it might have gone down, actually. So time of recording today, I think last I checked was about 49 and change, I think is what they got. So for all intent purposes, 50%.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
like 50 sounds pretty reasonable.
So they're a coin flip to get it. That's where we're at today, basically. Okay, very good. Luca agrees with it. Vito, what do you think?
I see it as it's their spot to lose at this point. When you look at all the
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the games in hand that they do have, the teams that are behind them are, with the exception of the Islanders, are not winning. They're losing too. In fact, even Ottawa has been losing. So Montreal, like the gap hasn't widened between Ottawa and Montreal at this point. So I know if it's been the last couple of games, Montreal hasn't looked really good, especially at the goal when it comes to their goaltending. But they would have to have one of those crazy pre-Four Nations tournament slumps to really look at them and say, yeah, they're just out. And I guess I get where Luca's coming from by saying it's been like roughly 8 years, because if you remember, when was the last time that Montreal was actually competing for a playoff spot versus they got in because of whatever rules changed and whatnot. You know, that Stanley Cup run that they went on.
A freak.
It was they technically weren't supposed to make the playoffs, but they got in and then went on a Cinderella story run. And obviously we loved it. It was one of the best runs in our lives, but. And it was the closest to the Stanley Cup that we got since '93. So, it's deserving where they're at. I just hope that they're allowed to have like a couple of games where it's off, even though we're very tight in a playoff race. But if they're going to go on a 5, 6, 7 game slump, where eventually the other teams are just not going to lose and they're going to pass Montreal. And right now they're in a situation where they could sit and I'm not saying be comfortable, but they're not completely out of it. They're very much in it. But if they go 6, 7 game slump, they're going to be out of it.
I don't disagree by any stretch there. If anything, and I hate to even put this out there. I mean, generally speaking, I'm a realist. I don't want to be considered a pessimist, but I think even at 50%, it's even more than perhaps where they're really at. I'm not happy the way I've been seeing them play the last few games, even with the overtime wins. These are crazy comebacks, which the team has done in the past, and that is part of the magic of them, but it's not sustainable. The way they played against St. Louis was like brutal. So that was a really bad one too. And my fear about the team is that if you don't continuously get that magic from the mid six, like you were doing, that Anderson and Galley and Dvorak line, which was like just going full tilt, full cylinders, I don't know how sustainable that is for them. And my biggest concern with them is I'm concerned that the amount of work that's being placed on Monty is just wearing him down. And given the fact that Dobesh hasn't had a lot of time in the net, my concern there as well is he comes in and takes over and he gets shellacked. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that it's a coin flip, but like you said, Vito, I think the teams behind them are not going to continuously, keep losing. At some point, these teams are going to catch up, and that little bit that they have ahead of the New York teams, for example, and even Detroit, that's going to close.
It's sad because when you think of it, like these last 3 games, they were games where they could have literally widened the gap even past Ottawa.
Monstrous, and Ottawa's been losing too. Yeah, man.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not overly concerned. I'm not overly concerned about the Andy line or the Galley line, whichever line you want to call that. I'm more concerned about Heineman, Evans, and Armia have not been anything close to what they were like before the Four Nations tournament. Not even a little bit. It's been a ghost town with that line. Yeah, they haven't been producing as much. But
it's your fourth line. I mean, what they were doing was unsustainable from the get-go.
Still.
Right? I mean, I'll throw that to you, Luca. Like when they were doing this, what they were doing before Four Nations, and Heineman before he got hit by that car in Utah, and was taken out. Right? Like that line was insane. We were like, what is happening here? It's only fair, I would imagine, agree or not, that wasn't something that was going to persist. So I personally am not shocked by it. I would like to see a bit more, but your take on that being, you think you agree with Vito on this one?
What, that the fourth line isn't performing like they were before?
Well, that they're like a reason necessarily of concern, for example, that their level of play right now is perhaps the reason why the team might be not where they were right out the gate.
Look, I don't want to blame the fourth line for everything that's happening right now. Honestly, I think the team's tired. Okay, the entire team. I think the entire team's tired. They're not experienced. I think the coach is not experienced. He made some questionable decisions the last game, pulling Monty out when there was 10 minutes left of the game. Like there's so many little things that just like contribute to the fact that we're not playing at our full potential. And I can't really blame just the fourth line for that. But I do see Vito's point where like they're
bringing nothing,
driving force. Like definitely the fourth line was giving us a little bit of a little pep in their step. But like I don't know. I think it's a lot of little factors that are contributing.
The fact that we're seeing this version of Jake Evans makes me very happy that he ended up signing for a contract at $2.8 million versus the 4 and 4.5 and all the numbers, the ridiculous numbers that were at. I'm not bashing Jake Evans, but this is Jake Evans.
Yeah.
This is Jake Evans.
Okay. So you're a big believer that he got his contract and he was just on the
not necessarily. I'm saying that I'm happy that we didn't get caught up in that moment where he was on a heater and overpaid him the way that Armia was overpaid back then when Bergevin signed him and gave him 3.4 at 4 years. Yeah. And we're like, oh yeah, that playoff run and what he did in the playoffs was great. Throw money at it. And for Jake Evans, now he got paid exactly the amount that we said this is what Jake Evans is worth. So I'm happy he fell into that price range versus. Could you imagine if he was playing like this right now? And he's getting paid $4.5 million. All of a sudden, the fans are not going to be behind and as supportive to Jake Evans as they've been all these years.
Wait, do you think he's playing this way because he only got that contract?
No, I'm saying that he's coming. It's back down to reality with him. And I think that when we saw what we saw before he got the contract, that was just a guy that everything was going right for that person. All ducks in a row, every shot he was taking. I'm not discrediting what he's capable of doing as a defensive forward, as a penalty killer, as all those things.
No, I get
but
you.
The shooting percentage he was at and being on a 40-point pace and a 25-goal pace at a point and all that stuff, that was not Jake Evans.
No, I think I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to hang the fact that you're talking about the fourth line as the reason. I think everything that we're basically saying now is kind of why I'm saying that I think even at 50% of making the playoffs, I'm actually quite happy with those odds. I expect it to be a lot lower. There's just a lot of things catching up to them now. that third and fourth line that were really going above and beyond the expectation that they're supposed to give you, that's coming back down to reality. The workload on Monty is catching up. The tiredness, like you suggest. I mean, these things play factors. So listen, all things being equal, all the teams are tired by this point of the season. Hopefully everybody's suffering in the same way.
And don't forget, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't forget too. Right after the Four Nations, that's when Montreal's playoffs started.
Mhm.
So they've been going.
Yeah.
They've been rocking at 100 and 150%.
Well, that's very fair.
So
That's very fair.
maybe fatigue is a factor, but at the same time, you're not in the playoffs yet. So find whatever you have in the tank.
Yep.
Tiptoe your way into the playoffs, and if you happen to gas out and lose in the first round, so be it. Because at the end of the day, nobody expected you to make the playoffs this year to begin with. They expected you to be in the mix. You're very much in the mix. So success on that for the year. Making into playoffs is going to be a different ballgame.
Oh, I don't disagree at all. I mean, part of like we're talking about the second half of the season, and I think when you talk second half, something that jumps out, and I wanted to talk to you guys about too, Slafkovsky is starting to develop a trend. It would seem it's a young career, but it would seem like this is a guy who really starts to come on in the second half of the season. And I'm curious, in your opinion, do you think that this is just a young player just finding his way and ultimately is going to be able to bring what he's been bringing in the second half this season and last season and be able to do this over an 82 games? Or is this perhaps what fans need to start expecting? That this is a guy who's going to start slow. It takes a little bit of momentum to get going, and he's going to be a powerhouse in the second half. But ultimately, that means he's never going to probably hit that ceiling we're all hoping he's going to be. What do you think about that? Start with you, Vito, or
Okay. What I think necessarily is not that he's a second half player. There was already rumors at the start of the season that his back was hurting him a bit, and maybe that contributed to a bit of the slow start, whatever the case may be there. What I think happened with Slafkovsky is he watched the Four Nations tournament, watched how the hockey was played there, and saw that, okay, in order for me as a player to be successful in the NHL, I have to play a different style versus just focusing on my talent and skill alone. I need to be able to be gritty at the NHL. I need to be able to, go into dirty areas, use my shot more, and these types of things. And he said it in interviews. It like sunk into his brain a little bit. Now he's got to have to hone in on those skills and really figure out that pocket as a player that he's going to be able to play in all like at 100% all the time, and just utilize that not only his skill set, because at the end of the day he is a first overall pick. And he was drafted because when he reaches his full potential, they expect this unicorn type of player. We didn't want him to come in and play like a Jack Hughes. They didn't expect him to play like a Jack Hughes, where it's rely on talent, skill, and you just have this dynamic style of play. It was use that big body, rip that shot, make space, be physical if you have to. And when he got back from the Four Nations, and he basically said in an interview too, you want to be successful, play like a Brady Tkachuk. If he could play like a Brady Tkachuk, but like Juraj Slafkovsky, then great. And we saw flashes of that. Like when we first come back from the Four Nations tournament, you saw that game. It was like, okay, this is Slafkovsky. Let's just see if he could play this every night in and night out. And you don't see it night in and night out, but you do see a difference in him.
so? Do you? Well, hold on. So you're suggesting, just correct me if I'm wrong here. So you're saying ultimately he is figuring it out, and you think, given what he just experienced and what happened, which was the first time that's ever been done, that kind of play in the Four Nations, he's now taken that and said, okay, this is what I want to be. So you have perhaps an expectation this is what he'll start next season as?
I expect that going into the next season as being 21 years old. Crazy to say, but 21 years old, because he's still the youngest player on the team. That the Four Nations tournament showed him how to be successful. What he has to do to be successful among men at a pro level against the best in the world. You could tell this guy wants to be among those best players. He wants to play at the next Four Nations or the World Cup and whatnot. He doesn't want to be a default in there just because of the country he's playing for. You could see it in him. But now he's going to have to go out and prove that he's not a second half player. But at the moment, I expect him that next season, like he's projected to hit 50 points again this season. I expect him next season to take a step and be into the 60s.
Fair say. Fair say. Luca, what's your take on Slaf?
To be honest, I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't know. Like, you basically said everything that had to be said. No, definitely. Like, right after the Four Nations, I feel like, well, there was like that not a rumor, but he said it himself that they showed him tapes of Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah.
He definitely wanted to not model his game after him, but he's like, that's what I want to be. I want to be that kind of player. And he showed it. He's been showing it ever since. If he's going to be able to do that for a full season or if he's going to start off slow, I don't know. I'm really hoping that he does it for the full season. But there's definitely promise in his game. Like, you could see that there's a reason why he was picked first overall. There was definitely a reason. He has the body. He has pretty much all the tools he needs. He just needs to put it to good use. He needs to figure out how to put it to good use. And I think he's figuring it out now, right after the Four Nations, because he saw what it's like to play on the big stage, and he wants that. He's craving it. He's hungry for it. Like I said, Vito said it all. Like, I can't.
Don't pump his ego. He didn't say it all. He didn't say it all, but he said enough. And unfortunately, I'm inclined to agree with most of it. I think ultimately, and the reason I bring this up is because obviously it's a never-ending sort of conversation amongst the fandom, right? Where everybody nitpicks every player, everything they do all the time. And Slaf being that first overall is always going to be scrutinized probably more than most. And I think at this point, ultimately, when you look at a kid, like you guys are saying, this is a very young guy. He's a monster. He's a big body kid, but he's still a kid. He's going to be 21, right? Or is he 21 now? I don't remember. No, so he's turning 21 or he just turned 21?
He's turning 21 in a couple of days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, all right, that's what it was. So he's just about to turn 21 years old.
It's insane, by the way. That he's not even 21 yet.
Yeah. So, like, you got to temper the expectations of a guy coming out and putting up like 100+ points right out the gate. That wasn't what he was billed as. And people need to understand that the more and more reps he gets, the more and more he plays, you're going to probably see more of second half Slaf. I like that. Second half Slaf. More often than not, right? He might be a guy, and there are guys like this. There are guys out there, big guys, that do take a little bit longer to get the tracks going, right? To get those wheels on the tracks rolling before they start to go. And so I'm a big believer in this kid. I really, really like Slaf a lot. I really think he's going to be the guy that everybody sold us on, management sold us on. And I really do think that he is going to figure it out. And I do believe you're looking at a guy who, is going to be an absolutely pivotal piece of this team moving forward. So consider me a believer. I'm curious to know. Leave us in the comments what you guys think. Is this a guy who is going to be historically looked at as a second half player, or do you think he's going to figure it out? So I'm curious about that one. On another topic that I am curious to talk about, obviously, as we're getting closer to the end of the season, albeit there may or may not be playoffs, but it doesn't stop the people from discussing. You're looking at the team, you're looking at the team's inefficiencies. And the number one thing that people seem to circle around, predominantly these days anyways, is about 2C. What do you do with 2C? A lot of people happen to be happy with Newhook being there right now for whatever reason. I think he's doing
great.
He's doing an admirable job. He's doing very good. I don't know if he's the long-term solution. And let's go into the hypothetical that he's not. To put you guys on the spot now, is there somebody in mind, be it a player specifically or a player that you can say they got to find a guy like that you would like the Habs to go in the offseason to acquire to fit that 2C role? What do you think? Anybody come to mind?
I got someone.
You got someone? Tell me someone.
Sam Bennett.
I was gonna say
Sam Bennett. I think Sam Bennett right now, given the age he's at, given the playoff experience, the team he's played on, he's got the winning mentality now, right? And I think that given the style of play that he has, and that he could be a bit edgy and whatnot, it's the kind of guy that will properly insulate somebody like Nick Suzuki as well, and be his 2C in the sense that that Suzuki could go and continue playing his game and not be completely dependent on him to basically run it all, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's the style of game that Sam Bennett brings that Montreal doesn't quite have. And I think if you have somebody like him who's playing a bit more of an agitator role while being able to be productive and provide some secondary scoring and bring some of that winning pedigree with him, I think it's a recipe that Montreal could really benefit from. And at the same time, I think it's going to be that type of player that might provoke things and get under players' skin and cause the opposing team and the opposing players to make certain mistakes and errors and whatnot. There's a reason why when Florida Panthers went to acquire Marchand, everyone said, my God, it's going to be very annoying to see Marchand and Sam Bennett playing on the same line. Could you imagine how annoying those guys are going to be? Even getting into the players' heads and even just with their mouths on the ice, So I think that's a player that Montreal could definitely use. Again, the tricky part there is because he's 28 years old, going on 29, is how much do you pay that? And he's not going to come cheap because of what he comes with. But he's the type of player that I could think of off the top of my head right now that checks a lot of boxes. Is he perfect in terms of like the perfect 2C? No, but he checks a lot of the boxes that would be good for Montreal and where they're at today and taking that next step.
All right, that's fair. I'll get back to you with what you might do as a contract for him. Luca, you got it. You seem to have gave a little nod there when he mentioned Sam Bennett. Was that your guy too?
Yeah, well, he was my my first pick. Sam Bennett really like perfect for the team, but another one would be Robert Thomas if he's available. I heard St. Louis is like not against the idea of moving him.
That would be crazy,
right? Like
that'd be crazy.
Version of Nick Suzuki. He's a bit bigger. He's a bit faster. He's a bit better face-offs. He's having Nick Suzuki times 2.
I mean,
be really cool.
That would be. I don't even know how you'd be able to do that.
I don't know
how you do that. I mean, that is a great archetype player, though. Clearly, that's somebody that would obviously make the team tremendously better. Robert Thomas, I think, is a really underrated player. So yeah, no, that's a great pick. That really is. I mean, Sam Bennett, we know is going UFA, right? So he's the one that most people kind of also mentioned out there talking about. I think that the ballparking majority here, I don't have the metrics on hand, but from what I've seen, a lot of people are leery about Sam Bennett because of what it might cost given his age. So if he was your number one guy, Luke, I'll go back to you first. What would you be prepared to perhaps offer him if that was your guy?
Say that again.
Sam Bennett, how much would you?
Sam Bennett, what would you potentially offer him? Like if that were the guy, he's available, he's interested in coming to Montreal. He's 28 years old. Yeah, he's got a lot of pedigree, but term and salary is there something? Is there a too much? Do you do 8 times? I don't know, 9.
Can't do 8 unless
or 7. Yeah, 7. Fine, fair enough. You max him out and you give him $9 million a year. Is that enough to get it done? I don't know.
It's hard to say. Like Vito's saying no, but like guys, the salary cap's going up. Chychrun just got $9 million, and he's a good defenseman, but he's not $9 million, right? Kel McCarr has like what's his salary? Like 9.
Yeah, but can't look at Kel McCarr. Colorado did the McKinnon with Kel McCarr. They signed him when just before Kel McCarr was gonna explode, right? Then they gave him that contract, right? Just like they did McKinnon back then.
I want Joe Sakic's crystal ball, man. How he does this is sick. But yeah, anyways.
I don't know. Like, how do you justify giving somebody like Sam Bennett $9 million a year? I'd say maybe like 7 was pushing it. Yeah, 7, I guess. But like,
I mean, you're gonna have to pay.
Sorry,
you're gonna have to pay.
Yeah.
We know this. We know teams are gonna go out. We know teams are gonna flash cash at him. He comes with Stanley Cup. There's a type of like meanness to his game that is not found in everyday players. So these are these kind of intangibles that are out there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think you should just open the coffers entirely. So you're about like a 7. You think 7 is something you'd be doing?
Like the upper limit, yeah, but only because as good as mean and gritty and as like unique of a player as he is, at the end of the day, like that's that little voice at the back of my head keeps telling me he never went above 49 points in a season. It's like it's a stupid justification for him, but like
I think it's valid.
But like like we need points. We're looking for points. We're looking for scoring. And we're not going to get it with Sam Bennett. At least not that upper echelon of scoring, right? But then the argument comes like we're getting Demidov soon, so like maybe that can compensate. Like it's hard. It's really hard.
That's why they pay them the big bucks, right? If only. Vito, what would you give Sam Bennett hypothetically?
7 years between $42 and $44 million contract, so it's about six and change per year is where I would give it to him. Because when you look at it, I always go by that rule of thumb that I once brought up, is that they get $1 million for every 10 points. Now, factor in that he's a UFA who won a Stanley Cup and all that stuff. There's always a bit more of an uptick on that. And there's always a bit more of an overpay there. At the same time, got to make it enticing enough to want to come to Montreal. And putting aside the culture and the reputation Montreal has these days, there's always the issue with the taxes. So, I mean, at most I'd push it to 6.5, and even there, people are probably going to call me crazy. But with the cap going up and all that, agents are going to be asking that for that kind of player. The only thing I could see the argument that people will make is kind of what Luca said, where this guy, his highest season was 49 points, and he's only ever been on a 55, almost 60 point pace. But it's the other aspects of his game. Now, some people might look at that and say that production does not merit second line money or second line role and all that. But you have to watch the player and know that and believe that when he comes to Montreal, playing with somebody like Patrick Laine on the left and maybe Demidov on the right, and being consistently as a 2C rather than bouncing between 2 and 3 in Florida, you might get an extra uptick in production, right? And today, Montreal, Sam Bennett's agent's going to look and say, "You guys don't have another choice. Like, there's no alternative. You guys don't have another second line center that could come in tomorrow and do what my guy could do." So Montreal will likely have to pay. But I'll give Luca full credit. The Robert Thomas one is a good one. But the only issue with Robert Thomas, the only issue with Robert Thomas is the fact that he signed for another 4 or 5 years at over $8 million. And it's that while that's not a lot going with where the cap's going and what he's able to do, I just don't know if Montreal is going to trade the assets necessary to go get Robert Thomas. But I like the idea and I like the player behind it.
I think that would be the guy. Like, that would be a perfect fit. I just can't. I can't rationalize how they would make that happen. Like, what St. Louis would want in order to trade him, and I imagine it would be a lot. Right. But a player like that, which granted they're not everywhere. And I mean, he's going to have to be creative, Kent Hughes. I know he already talked about it in his press conferences. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to get creative. They're going to try and do something to make the team better in the offseason. So I am very curious to know. And guys like that are probably the ones that he's going to be looking at. I mean, I think he's pretty confident now. Well, there was a debate. I mean, I don't want to get into it too much, but we can for half a second. I mean, there was a debate, at least amongst the fans early days, whether Nick Suzuki is a true 1C or not. Or do you try to go out there and push Suzuki down to 2 and get yourself a bona fide one? No. I think that question's been answered.
Yeah,
I think we're done with that.
Because even if he's not, and I've said this in 10, 15 episodes ago, not every team has a McKinnon, a McDavid, and so on. There's teams that would be very fortunate to have a Nick Suzuki. Now, if you happen to have a Connor McDavid, a McKinnon, and all of a sudden your 2C is Nick Suzuki, then that just makes you that much of a better team. But they don't draft players like this all the time. Players like that are generational, franchise-altering players don't fall off trees all the time. Even this upcoming NHL draft, there's not really one of those types of players. The following one there is in Gavin McKenna. Yeah. But until then, it's like Montreal. You can't even say Montreal's going to get that, because that would mean that they'd have to basically get the first overall pick all over again. But again, Nick Suzuki now, and I've said it before, I believe he is a number 1 center in the NHL.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's 32 teams in the NHL. He's just not top 5.
What? Yeah.
No, not top 5. Maybe top 12.
I would put him top 12. He's in the.
I think he's top 10.
12 range, somewhere in there.
Definitely.
I didn't want to pocket, and just because I don't want to people ripping me, but top 10 for sure in my opinion.
Let him rip.
Okay.
Let him rip.
Let him rip.
He's top 10. I think I would be prepared to fight anybody who says that he's not top 10. I mean, given what he's done, just the defensive nature of his game, in addition to almost being a point-a-game player, guys only got 6 penalty minutes on the whole season. The whole season. He could probably be in contention for Selke Trophy nomination this year. Do you guys agree with this or no?
Yeah.
I think if he's not, it's very ignorant on the voters' part.
He's got nobody else. He's got nobody else to support him on the center line. Nobody else. Montreal's 2C, de facto 2C right now it's Alex Newhook. After Alex Newhook, it's Jake Evans, Dvorak.
No,
none of these guys scream 2C.
No. And I mean, just generally speaking, like to go to the Suzuki argument there for a second, just because it just happened to be brought up here organically. It's funny that people still harp on this. They're still saying, because to your point, right? They're saying things like, he's not a 100-point player. How can he be a 1C? He doesn't score 100 points. It's not just that. He's not the scoring machine like some of these other guys are, but the fact that what he's capable of bringing on a two-way game, how he makes those trips back and goes back in defensive and make crazy defensive plays, the fact that you could put him out there in any situation at all, shorthanded or whatever, and he can do it if he needs to, the fact that he puts in some of the more higher-end minutes on the team, night in and night out, plus the fact that he's getting close to a point a game. I mean, guys, come on. I can't understand how people make it tight anymore.
Cemented Nick Suzuki as the number one center for me, and as a number one center in the NHL for me. The fact that when trade deadline was coming, and he went up to his GM and said, keep the team as is, try not to move anything. And his GM said, you want to do it that way? Then put this team on your back and show us why we should keep these players. And he put those players on his back. He put his money where his mouth is, and start to write it. And now we're in a playoff spot.
I attribute that more to the fact of his nature as captain, more than perhaps being a 1C to prove the point. But I understand what you're saying, because then he even took his game to another level.
Add the rest of the stuff you mentioned, right? It was implied in what I was saying. The fact that he's a point a game player or at least close to it, and things like that. And
I really can't stand the whole the argument that he never scored 100 points. That means he's not a. Patrice Bergeron never scored 100 points in his whole career, and he was nominated for the Selke. How many times?
He won the Selke.
Times exactly.
How many times? Yeah. No, for sure, man.
It's such a weak argument. Nick Suzuki, that guy is amazing. He's so lucky to have him.
I really do think we're lucky to have him. I think ultimately every day there should be somebody coming up and building a statue of Pacioretty, and we all go and worship at its shrine for making this trade ultimately happen.
You know who's another player? Who's another player that never hit 100 points and was one of the best players, at least two-way players to ever play the game? Pavel Datsyuk. Granted, he got 97 points twice, but just to say,
that's a great point.
I'm just saying. He played with Zetterberg and on a dynasty Detroit Red Wings roster. I'm not comparing Suzuki to Datsyuk. The point is,
okay, good. They don't compare him to the Magic Man. I mean,
no, I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing the two. Okay. What I'm saying is that the 100-point notion, that if you're only a number one center, if you hit 100 points, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that goes into why a player should be a number one center or is categorized as a number one center.
No, absolutely don't disagree. And I would be curious to know, those that made it this far in the episode, let us know in the comments below as well what you think. Is that debate finally put to rest now? Is Nick Suzuki a true number one center? And if no, let us know why. I mean, the yeses, I think we can all understand the yeses, but I'm curious to know about the no's. If you truly believe in your heart of hearts, especially as a Habs fan, if you are one, and also let us know that as well. If you believe Nick Suzuki is not a true number one center, we'd be very curious to know why you say that. So let us know about that in the comments below. Let us know about your take about Slaf as well, given the nature of his later half of the season surges. And do you think that that's just a trend and that he's going to be for his career, or can he maybe work that out all season long? That'd be great. And I think finally, we'd like to know what you think about presently at this day, at the time of recording, when this gets published, the Habs are about 50% to make the playoffs. What do you feel about that? Is that about an accurate assessment, or is it a little more, a little less? Let us know as well. And I think that'll bring us to the end of this episode. So again, Luca, thanks very much for joining. Hope to see you around a little bit more than unlucky Dave. So many things. We're not going to get into it. Guys, please, a little bit of prayers up for Dave. He's got so much stuff going on. We wish him all the best. But other than that, for Luca and Vito, I'm Matt, and this was
Get Pucked.